Well, for reaction to the situation in Lebanon and the ongoing war on Gaza, I'm joined by the Palestinian Minister for Foreign Affairs, Dr. Visan Aghabekian. Thank you very much for making time, Doctor. And do you feel somewhat, given the situation in Lebanon this week and all the attention being there, that all eyes are off Gaza for the moment?
I think Gaza is on everybody's mind. Whatever is happening in Lebanon is atrocities and war crimes against humanity. Again, a continuation of whatever is happening in Gaza. But what is happening right now in Gaza, and it continues to happen, and what we have witnessing for the last year is just so atrocious and brutal that even if we wanted to put it aside, we cannot ignore it.
Talk to us about what is happening in Gaza right now.
Well, the situation in Gaza is, to say the least, is a humanitarian crisis, and it is very catastrophic. We have been witnessing this genocidal war for the last year with all the suffering that has been burdened by the people. There is an enormity of destruction of unimaginable extent. The killing is just unimaginable. Over 150,000 people killed and injured, lack of basic needs, lack of food, on the verge of famine, if not already under famine, 650,000 students with no schooling for 2 consecutive years now, and God knows when they will be able to return to their normal schooling life. A lack of basic necessities, lack of any kind of rights. Just imagine people living on less than 5 liters of water per day. That's way below the international standard. And the suffering is definitely, it has not been seen before, maybe in World War II and onwards. What we are witnessing today is war, is crimes against humanity that must be stopped immediately. And the world has granted Israel the right to reach its objectives. So today, what we are asking is for this world that granted Israel the right to reach its objectives to revisit and reassess what these objectives are. Because what we are seeing and what we are witnessing on a daily basis is killing and more killing of civilians. This is what we are witnessing on the Gaza Strip.
And you talk about, that suffering, that extreme suffering that has been happening, not only for the last year, for a long, long time now. Some saying, comparing it to genocide. Plenty of people have been saying that over the past year. How does it then feel to see that international communities, multilateral organizations haven't managed to get anything done yet, that the situation is still unresolved? There is still no ceasefire.
Well, yes, there is still no ceasefire, and we continue to demand for immediate ceasefire, but it is not happening. The international organizations try, and they are doing whatever they are doing. Is it enough? No, it's not enough, and we demand a lot more. But today, what is happening in Gaza and the restraints on the work on international organizations is increasing by the day. And this is why we are asking for interventions by the international community to ensure that we have unimpeded interventions in the Gaza Strip and an immediate cessation of fire and an end of this war.
Look, the UN General Assembly is ongoing this week in New York while we're talking. The whole world basically gathered. Benjamin Netanyahu speaking today as well, Israel's Prime Minister. How does it feel watching everyone there discuss Gaza without having any progress made so far?
Yes, and this is what President Abbas yesterday tried to send a message on. He described the dire situation on the Gaza Strip and also described the threatening situation on the West Bank. And he reiterated his ongoing calls for immediate stopping of the war and the unimpeded humanitarian assistance. He called the international community to shoulder its responsibilities. He mentioned the hundreds of uncomplied with UN resolutions. He asked that the international community holds Israel to account. and requested that Israel complies with international law and the UN Charter. And most importantly, he asked the international community to ensure that they follow up on the ICJ ruling and ensure its implementation, bringing us to a stage where we end this occupation once forever with a sustainable peace onwards. And he presented to the world, to the international community, a roadmap of what he thinks should happen for us to be able to move on.
And there has been some progress elsewhere as well. A proposal put forward this time by the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Saudi Arabia, Prince Faisal bin Farhan Al Saud. He's talking about this global alliance. It's been announced Friday that it's going to push for a two-state solution for Israel. How welcome is that news?
I think that is very much welcomed. This was iterated previously. Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. And today we have seen Saudi Arabia's Prince Faisal bin Farhan, the foreign minister, in a press conference talking about the world coalition on materializing the state of Palestine. And he very specifically said one state has been established. And today the second state, which is Palestine, is overdue. And this is what we will be rallying behind and having an international coalition to work on that materialization and having a conference held on that matter. So it's very much welcomed.
And as you mentioned there, this comes after comments last week by Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman that Saudi Arabia will not establish diplomatic relations with Israel as had been previously planned until there is the establishment of the Palestinian state. And in terms of the sort of conditions that have been put down in order for that to happen, do you think it's possible? Do you think it will be achieved?
I think anything is achievable if we resort to reason. And reason says that if Israel wants to live as a normal state and normalize with the neighbors in the area, it needs to act as a normal state. And to act as a normal state, it needs to end its occupation and live side by side in peace and security with its neighbor, the state of Palestine. So all of this is in line with what is needed for a future outlook on what peace looks like in the Middle East.
Returning to the situation back home for you in terms of what's happening in Gaza, but elsewhere as well, the West Bank. Often a lot of criticism that there isn't enough reporting about what's happening in the West Bank. What do you know about the latest there?
Yes, the West Bank, also the situation is very volatile. We have unleashed settlers who are supported by ministers in the coalition government who are settlers themselves. So they do whatever they want on the West Bank. We see them on the streets. We see them burning trees, burning farms, and so forth. And this is a daily happening. We see the Israeli occupation forces invading Palestinian areas, even areas A that are totally under control of the Palestinian Authority. They invade villages, towns, Palestinian camps. There is further land confiscation for the expansion of illegal Israeli settlements. There is piracy of Palestinian tax money by withholding that money and not transferring it to the Palestinian Authority on a monthly basis. There's collective punishment of people. There are Judaization efforts that are intensifying in Jerusalem, attacks and intrusion into the Al-Aqsa compound on a daily basis. There's restrictions on all types of human rights in all facets of life for Palestinians. And if you talk about detentions, we have over 10,000 Palestinians who have been detained in Israeli prisons and already sit in Israeli detention camps today. So the situation is as threatening as it is in the Gaza Strip, but in a different form.
In terms of hopes for a ceasefire, particularly regarding the Gaza Strip, any prospect so far seems to have stalled, seems to have been held up. There doesn't seem to be much will, and depends on who you listen to as to who's holding that up. Where are you at in terms of the moment and hopes for a ceasefire?
Well, we continue to demand an immediate ceasefire because this war, this genocidal war, cannot continue. We cannot continue to see our people being killed and slaughtered on a daily basis. We continue demanding and we remain hopeful. We have to remain hopeful and we have to work more with our allies who are able to influence the Israeli side, because it is the Israeli side who every time we come close to reaching a ceasefire, something happens and we have new Israeli conditions. And for many, the belief is that only an imposed ceasefire will work at this stage.
Do you have any hope of ceasefire with Benjamin Netanyahu helming Israel?
I will be shockingly surprised if it happens with Netanyahu. But Netanyahu or anyone else in the Israeli government or now, or any new coming government, if at all, what needs to be done is go to reason and think strategically, and enough is enough for Palestinians and most probably for Israelis.
Do you think there is enough domestic pressure internally on Netanyahu from the public, from the voting Israelis, for there to be a change in his approach?
I think there's a lot of pressure. We've seen it mounting throughout the last 11 months, but it's obviously has not reached the stage where it should influence the decision-making of this coalition rightist government.
In terms of ceasefires, when we talk about them, we can almost get confused because there's war happening almost on two fronts at the moment from Israel, not only towards Hamas in Gaza, but also Hezbollah across the northern border into Lebanon. Also discussions at the moment of dashed ceasefire hopes for that border between Israel and Lebanon. Do you think, though, if it was achieved, a ceasefire with Hezbollah, that would actually ease the issue that's happening in Gaza, and that you'd find a kind of a coalition of ceasefires, if you like, something that would unlock better relations elsewhere?
I think what is happening on the Lebanese front is as important and as difficult as what is happening on the Palestinian Gaza front. I think a ceasefire has to go across the line, whether it's in Gaza or in Lebanon. Any escalation on either side will help erupt the other side and even escalate the situation even further than Gaza and Lebanon. So what we need to see is a complete ceasefire on all fronts.
Do you think Israel could ever be made to pay compensation to help rebuild Gaza in a future world?
Israel did a lot of destruction in Gaza, and compensation is warranted. Israel has been asking for compensation from Arab countries, from Germany, from other places for what was perpetrated and inflicted upon Jews all over the world. And I think what Israel has done needs to be accounted for, and Israel should be held responsible, and compensation is part of it.
And other lines that we've been getting out of the UN General Assembly this week, European Council President Charles Michel saying that the continued denial of state for Palestine threatens the security not only of Palestinians but of Jewish people as well. What do you say to that?
That's very true, because Israel cannot enjoy and be prosperous if its neighbor is occupied and in pain, and its people killed and the rights violated on a daily basis. If Israel wants to live in peace and security, its neighbors have to also enjoy that peace and security. And that will only happen if the Palestinians are able to exercise their self-determination and to materialize their state and empower the state that is already on only 22% of historic Palestine.
How do you think the Palestinian Authority plays into the role of a two-state solution? Does it?
Well, the Palestinian Authority is the key player. The PLO is the one responsible for the policy and whatever happens on the political level in terms of the state of Palestine. And the Palestinian Authority is the operational arm of the PLO. So whatever transpires now and in the future will be part and parcel of what the Palestinian Authority will be doing here and in Gaza as one unified entity.
In terms of what's been happening in Lebanon this week, it's reignited a lot of discussion about Iran-backed proxies operating throughout the Middle East and the disruption, the violence that's caused by them, and indeed the threat towards Israel. That has also reignited discussion, of course, about Hamas. So would you accept that Hamas is a problem within Gaza that needs to be dealt with?
I think the problem is the occupation. The occupation is the root cause of the problem. If there was no occupation, all the consequences and the results that have developed because of that occupation will be dissolved. So let's focus on the occupation and the Israeli measures, and then we can deal with the rest of the issues that also affect the situation today.
Are you concerned about the upcoming anniversary of the 7th of October, of course, which kicked off the recent wave of atrocities and the situation in Gaza we've been watching over the past year?
The 7th of October is a very, very dark day, and whatever ensued after the 7th of October will remain in our memory and the world's memory for a very long time. I think, I hope, and I pray, and I demand that by 7th of October, we see something different, something that gives us hope that there's a better future for our children, and something that they can look forward to rather than looking back to a year of suffering and pain and loss and needs for people to just rehabilitate and live a normal life. This will take a long time, but October 7th will remain with us for a very long time.
In terms of that hope heading forwards and what could change in the world in the coming months, of course, there's a US presidential election coming up. It feels very far away. The news is not focusing on that at the moment, given the situation in the Middle East. But of course, who ends up in the White House could have a very big impact on what happens in the Middle East. Who would be better for Palestinian people? Do you think Donald Trump or Kamala Harris?
I really can't say. I'm not in a position to judge, really, but I think whoever comes to become the president of the United States, it is long overdue that the United States looks at the region in a much more balanced way and takes into consideration today's coalition of the Arab world, the international community, the EU, Norway, and thinks of a better future for the area, a better future where Israel and Palestine can live and prosper together. The situation as is cannot continue, and the ICJ ruling did a lot of justice to the Palestinian people, and this should be seriously considered by the United States, just like it is considered today by most of the states of the world.
Do you feel that at least some of the American public are on the side of the Palestinian people?
Yes, there has been a lot of move in terms of support to the plight of the Palestinians. We see it in universities. We see it in several organizations. We even see it amongst the American Jewish population, especially amongst the younger people. I think what has happened or whatever is happening right now in Gaza and in the occupied Palestinian territories, the West Bank and East Jerusalem, has a lot of influence of how people are viewing the situation today as compared to how it was in the past.
And yet, at the same time, Israel saying yesterday that they've received more than $8 billion in military aid from the US on the same day that the US announced it was sending around the same amount to Ukraine as well. How does it feel to hear news of that?
Well, it's not good news because the United States continues to boast about human rights and the right of all people and on the standards by which they need to deal with the people around the globe. On one hand, they tell us we are for the stopping of the war and we provide humanitarian assistance. And on the other hand, they supply Israel with weapons and ammunition. It doesn't work. And this fails humanity. If you want to have peace in the area, you need to refrain from sending Israel more arms that will kill Palestinians and the other neighbors as well.
What are your concerns from here about the possible escalation of violence and tension in the wider Middle East? From what we've been seeing in Lebanon this week, also we saw claimed attacks from Houthis on into Israel today as well. So it does certainly feel like even more players are becoming further involved in what's happening directly with Israel and its foes. How concerned are you in the coming weeks?
Well, we are very concerned because any escalation will further exacerbate the situation, and it's not in the best interest of anyone in the region, Israel, Palestinians, and the region at large.
When Iran says that Hezbollah is acting in the interests and the defense of Hamas and Palestinians in Gaza, what do you say to that?
I say Hezbollah is also defending its own the Lebanese borders and its own people. Now, who is working with Iran, who is not working with Iran, that's besides the issue. The issue is Israel's expansionist ideology, where that is touching everybody around Israel.
What do you think perceptions are internationally of Israel now, given the events of the last year?
I think Israel has lost a lot of its supporters around the globe. And if you just look at the statements the world leaders have presented at the UN gathering in the last 2 days, you would realize how the states, the various states are perceiving Israel. And for Israel to continue, it needs to do a lot of soul searching and a lot of rethinking of what it has been doing in the past. Israel cannot continue as a state above the law. Israel cannot continue to occupy another people and suffocate their lives on a daily basis. And Israel cannot continue to prosper if it wants to live in peace and dignity. And at the same time, it's violating the rights of the people around it and having this expansionist ideology of displacing people, occupying land, and creating a land of its own while ruling others in a form of apartheid.
And I appreciate this is a difficult question to ask, given the state of affairs currently for the Palestinian people. But if you could achieve the aims of getting, a ceasefire and a two-state solution and, two states coexisting against one another and with one another, could you imagine a peaceful and dignified state of affairs for both Israel and Palestine?
Of course. Of course, if there are rules of engagement and there are friendly relations between the two states and there is mutual respect and dignified presence for both states, why not? And we've been saying this since we have opened our arms on negotiating with Israel and reaching an agreement with Israel. The intention was at one point to reach a Palestinian state living side by side with its neighbor Israel in peace and security. Everything is manageable if there is a genuine outlook on what peace is, what the parameters of this peace are, and what the needs of both people are, not one people on the account of the other.